All right. I'm just going to mute everyone right now. Yeah, thank you. Welcome. My name is Sam Gold. I'm the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, and we're very happy that you could join us this evening for our series of municipal meetings that we are holding as part of our regional housing plan. We are creating a regional housing plan for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region, but we're also creating 12 individual affordable housing plans for 12 of our municipalities. And this is the meeting for East Haddam for our project. Many of you may be familiar with the talk about affordable housing in Connecticut in the last few years. And out of that came a new requirement that towns at every 5 years create a plan that under the Connecticut General Statutes 830J, Section 830J, to create a plan to expand opportunities for the development of affordable housing. We're gonna go into that in great detail tonight, and you'll learn a lot, and hopefully we will learn a lot from you. Before we turn it over, I turn it over to Liz Esposito and Megan Juflis, who will be our primary people running the meeting tonight. I just want to introduce some of the important people who are joining us. So we have our project managers, Megan Juflis for RiverCOG and Robert Collins from our lead consultant to SLR. Also from SLR, we have Liz Esposito, who will be one of our main presenters. As our liaison from the town of East Haddam, we have Jim Ventris. We also have the First Selectwoman, Irene Haynes, who's joining us. We have a number of other guests, probably representing a number of commissions and committees in town. There's only, let's see, 18 of us in total. If we wanted to take a couple minutes and just go around, and if people want to introduce themselves, let's go ahead and do this. I have everyone muted, so you have to unmute yourself when you introduce yourself. But I am going to let's see, just go based on the screen. So, Clary Brunel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Clary Brownell, I'm Chairman of Planning and Zoning for the town of East Haddam.
Great, welcome. Right, I see Bernie Gillis.
Hi, Bernie Gillis. I'm on the Planning and Zoning, and I'm also on the Conservation Commission in East Haddam.
All right, next I see is Debbie Langdon.
Hi, Debbie Langdon on Planning and Zoning as an alternate. Also newly moved from overdeveloped Florida.
Oh, welcome to Connecticut, and welcome to the Lower Connecticut River Valley and East Haddam.
Thank you.
Picked a wonderful place.
Yes, love it.
All right, next on my screen I see Margot Burns. She is a senior planner at RiverCOG who's joining us. Welcome, Margot. I see Lewis, you're joining us. If you want to introduce yourself, please unmute.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't try to say my last name.
I've learned. Salakrup?
Salakrup, very good. I'm a member
Salakrup.
of the East Haddam Planning and Zoning.
Great, welcome, Lewis.
Thank you.
Next I see is Brendan Cox.
Yeah, hi, Brendan Cox. I am the editor of the East Haddam News, the weekly newspaper in town. Just here to listen.
Great, well, thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Next is Susan. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm an alternate on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and also a member of the Open Space Commission, and among all other positions in town. But thank you.
And next I see is Dan Yan. Yanni?
Jamie, hi. I'm on the Wetlands Commission, but mostly just interested in listening to the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dan. Richard, if you'd like to say hi.
Yep, Rich Pettinelli, Secretary of Planning and Zoning.
Great, welcome. And then I see Denise.
I'm just a fly on the wall. Nice to meet you all.
All right, well, welcome. We value our flies as well. And we have someone joining us on the phone. You are muted. What is it to unmute on Zoom, on phones? It's star. Does anyone remember? Okay. Well, I will Google that, or we will Google that and get that to you, so you can unmute yourself to participate later on if you'd like. Is there anyone else that I haven't? Oh, you oh, yes.
I'm muted. I'm
Great.
Ed Gubbins from zoning.
Great. Well, welcome.
All right.
And
Janice.
Oh, Janice. Hello, Janice. Janice is our community planner from RiverCOG. I am so sorry that I skipped over you. Like I see Janice every day, and it's like, yeah, I should. So Janice is also one of our key staff on this project and helping with coordinating plans for 12 towns. So thank you, Janice, for being here. So with that, do I turn over to Megan or to Liz?
I would say give it right on over to Liz.
All right. So Liz, you can start the meeting.
All right. Well, thanks for kicking us off and getting all those introductions going. I'm just gonna make sure I can see everybody while I'm presenting. All right. So Sam gave us a pretty good overview of what we're doing tonight and where this is coming from. RiverCOG's put together a great project team with several consulting groups to work with your town to create your affordable housing annex. All right, so tonight we have a lot of content to cover, and I'm going to try and go as quickly while still making it informative and engaging. We're going to go over what the housing plan is for the region and for your community, and what that means for your town. We're also going to go over some existing conditions, run through a lot of data about demographics, as well as environmental and other policy conditions in town that impact housing. We've also developed a housing needs assessment, which plays against the supply and demand for affordable housing in your community. And to wrap it up, we're going to have a session where you can give us some feedback, ask some questions, and we can have a well-rounded discussion about the next steps. So our goals for you tonight are to take in this new information, learn a little bit more about affordable housing in East Haddam and why things are the way they are. You can provide us with input about strategies and recommendations that we think would be a good fit for your town, and for you to ask questions. And as I mentioned earlier, for our polling exercises toward the end of the night, it'd be helpful if you can have a second tab or window open on your computer or have your smartphone next to you, so you can participate easily when we get to that. So now I'm going to toss it to Megan for this slide real quick.
Thanks, Liz. So as Sam mentioned at the outset, RiverCOG has been working on a regional approach to housing. We're creating a regional housing plan, of which the 830J plans for 12 of our region's towns will be a part. So the regional housing plan is really a follow-up to our regional plan of conservation and development, which was adopted in September of 2021. And many of you may have been part of that process. If not, it is available on the RiverCOG website, and we're very proud of that document. So if you have a chance to check it out, it's rivercog.org. But during the regional plan process, there was strong support for a regional approach to analyzing and addressing housing issues. And so as a follow-up, the RiverCOG board, which is all of our 17 towns' chief elected officials, decided to collaborate on a regional housing plan. And 12 of the towns also decided to complete their 830J required plans as part of this process. And so We've decided to complete this in two parts. The first part is the regional housing analysis that focuses on region-wide trends and challenges related to demographics, economics, and housing. It'll make recommendations about total number and types of housing units that the region can absorb under current and future conditions, and make recommendations about ways that the region can assist towns in housing coordination. We had two presentations related to this regional part of the plan. The first was in October and the second was just in January, and those are both recorded and available on the project website. That's rivercog.org/RHP, and I can put that in the chat. So the second part of the regional housing plan, which is what I'm sure all of you are most interested in, are the 830J plans. And that's what we're here to work with you on today. And the way that these 830J plans relate to the regional housing analysis is the two pieces will inform the other. So we'll look at the recommendations from the overall region's housing market and think about that when we're looking at working on your plans, but we'll also take everything that we're hearing from you and bring that back into the regional recommendations. So the two parts inform each other. And I guess with that, I will give it back to Liz for the rest of the presentation.
All right, thanks. So we're going to say 830J a lot. That is the state statute that requires municipalities to have an affordable housing plan and to update it every 5 years. Towns were supposed to create these plans by June 1st of this year. We're well on our way to meeting that deadline for your town. And this, while it's a state mandate, it is providing a bottom-up approach. So instead of the state telling you all what you need to do in your town, you can create a plan that reflects your values and is appropriate for the conditions in your town. So there you go. This is your opportunity to have a plan that reflects your priorities. The state also released a guidebook on what they would like included. So this, among other things, includes a community values statement, a housing needs assessment, identification of policy barriers to affordable housing development, and we'll get into all of that tonight, as well as a plan with goals and strategies and actions. So some of the things that we think might be appropriate for East Haddam we'll have you vet tonight, and then apply best practices. So what is affordable housing? There's a lot of myths around affordable housing, so we're going to try and clarify that tonight. Affordable housing is typically defined by the state, by HUD, as housing that costs no more than 30% of a person's income. If you're spending more than 30%, you are considered cost burdened. So under a separate state statute, 830G, affordable housing, in addition to being less than 30% of your income, it also applies to low income households. And those are folks that make less than 80% of the state or area median income. So you'll see the abbreviation AMI in this presentation a lot. That means area median income. So in East Haddam, a family of 4 making less than $80,000 a year is considered low income. For a single person, that would be less than $56,000 a year. We also have calculated out the maximum that these households can spend on housing and still be under that 30% every month. So in addition to those regional meetings at the end of 2021, we also did a community survey. We had pretty good participation from East Haddam, 64 responses. On this slide are some demographics about the folks that answered. I'm not going to go into all of them, except to say that these results, the people who participated tended to be older than those that are in town. and they tended to live in smaller households. So this may impact some of the ways that they answered questions. This was a pretty lengthy, well, there were a lot of questions in this survey. We're only going to highlight a couple for the sake of time, but these results are available if you'd like to browse them on your own. So we asked, does the community have enough housing for the following populations? And the respondents typically said that there wasn't enough housing for people living alone, for young adults, for low income households or renters, or for seniors. And there was general agreement that there was enough housing for families with children, for homeowners, and for local workers. We also asked if there are any benefits to having affordable housing in the community, what would they be? So half of the respondents indicated that it would be a positive impact on the community. And some of those benefits they identified were economic growth, increased diversity, whether that's ethnic, socioeconomic, age-wise, all of that, enabling seniors to age in place, and enabling young people who grew up in the town to remain in town, as well as creating opportunities for lower income residents, providing options for single income households, and equity. Now let's take a look at your planning and zoning. Since the whole commission is here, pretty much this won't be news to anyone. Most of the town is zoned for residential at a pretty low density. A lot of that is because of your septic and well systems. And East Haddam Village has some opportunities for higher and the Lake District have opportunities for higher density housing. 25% of the town is committed to open space, but
Liz,
22. Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Can I just interrupt? What did you just say
Sure.
about what areas? Can you go back to the last slide?
Oh, sure. That the Lake District.
Yeah, like where that purple line is?
So that's the green. I don't know if you can
Oh.
see my cursor there.
Yeah,
So
I can
where
see your
this L is. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's where things may, by the code, are enabled to be a little bit denser. And
You're
then,
saying can be.
yes, not
Okay.
necessarily are.
Okay.
And then in your village district, there are some opportunities there as well.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So looking at available land, 22% of the town is vacant. But so there could be some potential there. However, that there are likely environmental issues that make this land difficult to develop. And we can see some of that here. So because you're on well and septic, the soils are incredibly important. So in this map, you can see all the areas in orange or yellow are not appropriate for septic. And that knocks out a lot of the town. Other things like wetlands, flood zones, steep slopes, aquifer protection areas, all of that restricts what can be put on different parcels. So zooming out a little bit to the whole region, this is the future land use map in the RPOCD that Megan mentioned. Megan, I don't know if you want to jump in on this one.
Sure, no problem. So as I mentioned, the regional housing plan kind of grew out of the regional plan of conservation and development. And as Liz was saying, you know, a lot of land in East Haddam isn't necessarily suitable for development because of environmental constraints, flood zones, watershed areas, aquifer protection, etc. And this is something that we took into account when we created the regional future land use map. And so the regional future land use map was based on a sustainable strategy of focusing growth away from these protected areas, wildlife habitat, natural resource protection corridors, protected open space, watershed areas, aquifers, flood zones, and instead focusing growth towards areas of existing development, infrastructure, and with access to transit. Not to dwell too much on this because this is, of course, your plan, but just to give you an idea of how those areas overlap. The green on this map is the areas that are more protected. The yellow are the areas that are more suitable for development.
Great, thanks. And so we also took a look at your POCD. which was recently adopted in 2019, and it has a lot of material in there that we can capitalize on. So I just highlighted a couple strategies that talked about housing. So directing housing development to areas that are adjacent to East Haddam, Moodus Village, and other designated nodes, encouraging the development of diverse housing types, considering developing new village district zoning for areas within or adjacent to the villages, including small lot, single family housing, 2-family and townhomes within walking distance of commercial areas, explore methods to better encourage mixed use, investigating ways to partner with nonprofit developers to rehabilitate older housing for affordable housing. So a lot of this has already been laid out as goals for town, and our job now is to build on this and keep that momentum going. So let's move on to demographic trends. We'll quickly go through this as well, since in your POCD, I'm sure you went through a lot of this. Your population has started to plateau beginning in 2000. We saw a little peak in 2010 and a slight dip in our latest census in 2020. That yellow dashed line are the state data center population projections that were developed in 2017 that show a little bit of a dip in the next 20 years, but not too significant. But this won't be evenly distributed throughout your population. In our latest estimates, 20% of East Haddam is over the age of 65. So this will likely cause housing turnover as people choose to downsize or leave the community. And this may cause some community shifts. Looking at your household composition, most of your families are, or most of your households, excuse me, are either 1 or 2 person. So that's nearly 60% are these smaller households. And this is a much higher portion than the county or the state. We also took a look at housing wage. So this is calculated by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And they create an estimate of how much you have to make per hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental and staying in that 30% of your income budget. So according to them, that would be $23.65 an hour. And then we took a look at Indeed.com, and they have maybe millions of employment records based by location to see what that hourly wage was. So their estimates that elementary school teachers are making $19 an hour, nurses' aides are making almost 15. If you're in retail sales, you're making about $14.67. So under that 23 by a significant amount. So we compared that to your major employers to see if they are essential workers. A lot of them have essential functions. And we also wanted to see any commute patterns, if the people who tend to work in East Haddam are living outside of it. And are there any commonalities about the places that they're coming from? And so you do have a large chunk that live in Moodus, but a lot of folks are coming in from areas that have either more affordable or more diverse housing types like Middletown and Meriden. And this data is from the census. It's based on W-2s, but unfortunately it doesn't include domestic workers or contract workers who are based in a different location. So there may be many more than these 1,300 workers that are coming into town to work every day. So that's kind of the supply side. Those are the people who are living in town or are in town. And then now we're going to look at your, I'm sorry, that was the demand side. Now we're going to look at the supply side, your actual housing stock. So again, no big surprise, dominated by owner occupied housing, higher than the county at 88%. And about 89% of all your units are single family detached. So that's a pretty homogeneous housing stock. And yeah, I think you have a couple two family, but it's really focused on that single family, much higher than the county or the state. When looking at the size of these houses, over 74% of the housing units in East Haddam are over 3 bedrooms. And so then we're comparing that to your nearly 60% of households that are 1 or 2 people. So there's this disconnect between who's living in town and the housing supply. So looking at the prices, you have a pretty homogeneous price range as well. So these are what the houses, excuse me, are estimated to be valued at by their occupants. So between 200 and 300,000 is pretty much your majority. And your sale prices have skyrocketed since the onset of COVID. So in 2007, you're at 419,000 at the peak of the market. And now it's close to 500,000. So this is exacerbating any housing affordability issues that are already occurring in town. Looking at home sales, it's been pretty robust since 2016. We didn't see a huge bump in sales in 2020. And that might be because there's just not enough supply, and that is driving that price up even higher. We also took a look at housing permits all the way back to 1990, just so you could see a pattern that in the 90s, you're really building up your community. And it seems like right around 2000 is when all the easily developable, buildable land has been used up, and these permits steadily start to drop. We saw a little spike in 2018, but overall, you average about 16 housing permits a year. We also looked at rental costs. The median rent is just over $1,000, which, while that's lower than the county and the state, this may be because it's such a small portion of your overall housing stock. All right, so now let's get into the needs assessment. So who needs housing? We took those numbers of your number of households in these income levels to see how many people in East Haddam really fall into these categories. So 29% of all households would be considered low income, making less than 80% of AMI. 42% of these households are 65 or older. Likely they're on a fixed income. They may have lowered expenses because their homes are paid off, but they still fall into this category. And again, these are primarily homeowners that are feeling the pinch. So we looked at cost burdens. So again, folks who are spending over 30% of their income on housing. And homeowners, by and large, if you're low income and a homeowner, you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing. So if 68% of all low income households are cost burdened, and this compares to only 9.4% of households that aren't low income. So there's a pretty big gap there.
Can I ask another question, Liz?
Sure.
And I don't know, maybe you're going to answer it, but when you say housing costs, and maybe you have said it before and I was in the other room and I apologize for leaving.
No worries.
What is considered housing costs? Is it just your rent or your mortgage, or do we include utilities in there? Do we include food? Like, what is the total?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to know if it includes property taxes, because we're usually in the top 5 in the country for property taxes.
Yeah, let me back up a little bit because I know I kind of breezed through it earlier. But yes, so it includes your rent or your mortgage, any HOA fees, insurance, utilities, and taxes.
Yeah.
Oh, do I not? Sorry, I was trying to trim this down for time. I think I pulled that slide out.
You know what?
But-
That's okay. That answers the question. You're
Yep, that
good.
answers the
great.
question. Yep, thank you. I was thinking the same thing.
Oops,
Listening
I
that
just
too.
run through this quickly. I'm sorry. So much content. All right. So then we dug into who is cost burdened among these folks. So if you're 65 or older, or if you're under 35, you're more likely to be cost burdened than folks in the 35 to 64 range. Again, not super surprising, but your gap is pretty significant. And again, owner occupied homes are more likely to be cost burdened than renter occupied. So we took all these numbers and we tried to calculate how much, oh, here we go. Here's your definition of that 30%. How much could folks who are low income, very low income, or extremely low income could afford maximum? So if you're a family of 4 in a low income bracket, you might be able to find housing in East Haddam, since most of your homes are valued between 200 and 300,000. But if you're in any of these other categories, you're going to struggle to find housing that is affordable to you. We also did the same calculation with rent. And you can see this different spread. While there may be plenty around 1,000, if you're in the extremely low income bracket, making 30% of area median income, the choices for you are incredibly limited. We also looked at protected affordable housing. So this is housing where either the occupant or the developer has received some assistance to lower the cost of housing. So it's within that 30% budget. So there are 139 units, or 3% of all housing in East Haddam falls into one of these categories, whether the occupant has a CHAFA or USDA mortgage, they're receiving tenant-based rental assistance, or some other government assistance that helps them with their costs. However, none of the units are deed restricted, which makes sure that when one occupant leaves, the next occupant will also be with low income or within a certain income bracket. Okay, so now we get into our gap analysis. So that we're taking your housing supply and subtracting your housing demand. So the number of houses in a certain price range minus the number of households that can afford them. So for families of 4, we have a gap of 289 units for anybody under 80% AMI. For single folks, there are 916 units needed. So these are folks that are already in your community that are likely spending more than 30% of their income to pay for their housing. All right, so I know there was a lot of data that I just ran through incredibly quickly. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about potential solutions or potential actions. There's no silver bullet here. These are just some ideas that we thought might be appropriate. So we're going to get into our polling. So get out your smartphone or go into that second tab and type in pollev.com/SLR 2021. And you'll get to a screen that will say, wait, we're going to put up a question, and then we'll get started. And
And-
while, oh, go ahead, Megan.
I was just gonna say, and I think you were probably gonna say the same thing. While we're letting people get set up with that, I wanted to take a look at, we have one question in the chat that maybe we can go ahead and address regarding the statistics and the source for those cost burden numbers.
Yes, so all of that data is from the Census Bureau. So either the American Community Survey or the decennial census, depending on availability.
And also
Can
HUD,
you repeat
correct?
that?
Yes, and HUD.
Can you repeat the site again?
Oh, the American Community Survey.
Yeah, for the poll that you want to see.
Oh, I'm so sorry. pollev.com/SLR 2021. And if anyone has any other questions about the data, we can answer them now while people are getting set up. All right.
Oh, I noticed you spent several pages talking about people who are commuting to work from outside of East Haddam to Haddam. And I was wondering if you have a statistic of people who live in East Haddam but are commuting and working, let's say in Middletown or New Haven or other places. So just the reverse of that.
Yes. So we can get that for you.
But it's not included. I didn't miss it in this report, right?
No.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, I'd
not.
like to see that.
Yeah, I'll get that sent over to Jim this week. All right, so let's try a test question. So your screen should have updated to ask you what's your favorite flavor of ice cream. And you can click A, B, or C, D, or E, and we'll just make sure that everybody's working and no technical difficulties.
I'm not. I don't have it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So is your phone a smartphone? Perhaps?
Yeah, but I'm on my computer trying to go into there.
Okay. So
POLLE.com, right?
yeah, POLLEV.com/SLR 2021.
And we type it in the chat, so maybe we can copy and paste.
Oh, yes. There we go. So, oh, and to answer Susan's question, so the statistics that you've seen that aren't in that community survey section are all from the census or from the state. Those 3 or 4 slides pertaining to the survey are the only ones that rely on that data. Oops. All right, so we have 7 responses. I think we have a couple more people. If anyone's having an issue, feel free to type it in the chat or use the raised hand function and we'll try and help you out.
SLR, what's after SLR?
2021.
2021. 2021.
Any luck?
I'm at survey questionnaire, surveys and polls.
Great.
That gives that choice. I don't see any questions.
Oh man. Well,
Don't hold up for me.
okay, we've got you on the line, so we'll ask you if you don't mind sharing your opinion. All right.
Totally blind.
So just for our own information, have any of you attended a workshop for the regional housing plan? So that would be either in October or back in January. We were kind of introducing these concepts. Okay. So we've got some folks who've been on board for a while. All right, I want to get at least 7 for everyone, so don't be shy.
And again, I'll just put out the plug that if anyone is interested, they are available to view on the website.
Yes. All right. So even split. Let's move on to our next one. Have you completed the survey? So were you among those 64 people that answered for East Haddam? All right, a couple new folks. Thanks for joining us. It is still open if you want to take it. And and we'll still accept those answers and put them in as part of your appendix. Okay. Now let's get into some stuff that's a little more relevant to you guys. So potential strategies. So we're going to present 3 tonight. This is by no means the only things that you can do. So we're going to be talking about leveraging municipal land, community land trusts, and Chaffam mortgages. So that's the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. So in Guilford, very recently, they acquired a property near the town green, and they got a state grant to do a feasibility study for the site, see what development would be appropriate for it. They decided housing was a priority. They wanted to have workforce housing, so their essential workers, police, teachers, grocery workers, folks like that, could live in town and didn't have to commute long distances. So they then voted to convey the property to a nonprofit affordable housing developer that would build in the size and scale that the town chose. So that recently passed and is under construction. So you can reuse existing town property that is maybe underutilized now, or acquire new property that may be foreclosed or derelict or something like that, or abandoned, and work with nonprofit partners or a local housing authority. So this needs a little bit of oversight from town council and town staff, but there is precedent throughout the state. So do you agree or disagree that East Haddam should study the suitability of underused town properties for housing development?
I agree.
All right, thank you. All right, okay. So we've got kind of an interesting split. Is anyone who answered neutral or disagree? Would you like to say why? Not to put you on the spot, but it would be great to hear your opinions so we can get kind of a broad view from everyone. All right, not a problem. So let's move on to the next one. So East Haddam should acquire additional suitable property for housing development. So this would either be through a purchase or accepting a land donation. And I should say, if you guys have any questions about what these strategies entail, feel free to ask them. And we can go over them together. All
I
right.
guess I have a question, Liz, on this
Yeah.
one. When you say we should acquire additional suitable property, like what does that mean when you say we should acquire? Is it, you're suggesting the town buy land or
accept a donation.
okay.
Yeah. And this land would would be intended for housing as opposed to a park or a school or another use.
Gotcha. So how does it work? You know, when you have this kind of idea, okay,
Mhm.
where the town accepts a donation, say, or whatever. So the town has acquired a piece of property that we're going to make into affordable housing. Does the town then become the landlord? Or
No.
do you have, okay.
So it,
Like, what do we,
once you-
as a town, what do we obligate ourselves to do? Just so they can understand how it works.
Sure. Yeah. So what we recommend that you do is create a plan of what you want it to look like, how many units you want, that kind of thing. And then under contract, transfer that property to a developer, typically a nonprofit that will respect your wishes on how this property is developed. And then they would be the landlord or the property manager going forward.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Just something I heard about, I actually was out in Cornwall, Connecticut, which is, you know, the middle of nowhere. And, you know, we in East Haddam feel like we live in the middle of nowhere. So it was kind of interesting that I had a conversation with somebody there. But what they have there is they have a housing authority for the town of Cornwall. And the housing authority buys a piece of property. And in this particular case, we were talking about one particular lot that had a house on it. And what they did was the town kept the land, but sold the house to the person who needed affordable housing. So the mortgage for the house was just for the dwelling, just for the building and not for the land. So it was like almost like a cooperative kind of a thing. But
Yes.
what it was able to do was it was able, you know, a couple of things. One, it gave that person an opportunity to have, you know, a situation where they could literally build equity, right? Because eventually what they did is that they said, okay, well, I've lived here for 5 years. I've built up equity. I've lived in a place. I've taken care of this, and I've created some wealth getting into it at a lesser rate because the land still is owned by the housing authority that the town. So it's kind of like a nonprofit, like public-private
Yeah.
partnership kind of thing. It was really kind of cool. And, you
Yeah.
know, I would imagine this would be something that, you know, and I thought about this when I heard about it, that when I got here, what, you know, if this was something that we could look at, because there's plenty of different properties and, you know, definitely, you know, as the statistics show that, you know, a lot of us are aging out, right? And a lot of us are, you know, downsizing and all this kind of stuff. Well, some of it this might be a way to do it. And I just thought it was a really cool idea that you could create affordable housing, yet still not, for a better term, you know, it wouldn't have to be Section 8. It could be a very lovely home. And it's just that the town owns the property or the land portion of it so that somebody can get into that piece of property for less money because they're only buying the house of that property, which was very cool. Anyway.
Yeah, you're actually
thought I'd share.
perfectly explaining the next strategy we were going to talk about, which are community land trusts. So that was a perfect transition. Thank you. So as Irene said, community land trusts are nonprofits. They can be a branch of the town or a separate organization that gain ownership of property and hold it for future redevelopment. And they can work with the community to develop their needs to create affordable housing. So I'm going to play this little video. It's only 1.5 minutes, so you don't have to listen to me drone on forever. That explains it in even more detail. So let me know if you can hear this. Nope. Dang it. Oh, it was such a good idea. So you're just going to have to keep listening to me. I apologize. So yes, they acquire land. Whatever's developed on top of the land can be sold. Typically with housing, there's a deed restriction on it that the next person that it is sold to will also be low income. And that keeps that housing protected moving forward. And again, they own the land and everything above it is owned by the occupant. Ugh. Alright. So this has recently been put in place, not only in Cornwall and in some other COGs, but also in the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust. They're based out of New London, but I think they're looking beyond the borders of New London as well. And they currently hold land for 2 family houses, but they also have community gardens, other agricultural lands, and they have the right of first refusal on 3 other buildings. So this is something that the town could look at as well, even before people are ready to sell, getting the right of first refusal where they go to the town first and say, hey, we're ready to leave. Do you want this property for this amount? And if the town says yes, they get it. And if they say no, it goes out into the open market. All right, so our next question, the town of East Haddam should support the development of a community land trust.
And I just want to, sorry, Liz, I don't know if you've already said this, but I don't think it would hurt to repeat anyways, just so that people know when you're answering these survey questions, this is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. So just because you say you agree or you strongly agree, doesn't mean that we are 100% going to pursue this in your plan. It just means that it's something that you might want more information about, consider. We would send more information, have more dialogue. So this is, as I said, the beginning of the conversation.
Great, thanks. That's a good reminder. So does anyone want to share why they answered the way they did, whether you agreed or disagreed, just so we can kind of round this out a little bit and you're not just names on a screen.
Well,
I'll speak up. I have a question. I'm sorry I don't have my
Okay.
camera on because I'm doing childcare duty at the same
No
time.
worries.
But just on the community land trust, you had shown that the funding mechanism for that example was the ARPA money. What other kind of funding mechanisms would the land trust use to acquire the land and actually do the projects?
Yeah, so the ARPA money is very new, but the concept of community land trusts way precedes it. So it could be donation based. They could receive grants as a nonprofit. They would have a lot of latitude to fundraise, whether through structured grants or funding sources or through donations.
And is there like a revenue generation point in the process where they're sort of self-sustaining? So they're acquiring and kind of redeveloping properties and then getting some kind of payback so they can continue the process?
As far as I know, no. Their function would be pretty lean, and they're really not making a profit on the land that they're developing and selling, or the buildings, excuse me, not the land.
So who does the upkeep on the property then? I mean,
The
is the
occupant.
town obligate? Well, of course, the occupant, but we all know that if somebody is in a place, doesn't guarantee that they're going to keep it up. Is the town going to be responsible for the upkeep of that property if they don't?
No.
So it's
So
just going to fall into disrepair.
not necessarily, because the
Well,
occupant
we hope
owns.
that- we hope not.
Would there
Yeah.
be some
You
sort
know.
of a homeowners association or condo association or management overseeing and enforcing the code enforcement? There has to be, some checks and balances, I think, is what the point they're making.
Yeah, so
Right.
just because it is in community land trust doesn't mean they wouldn't be subject to code enforcement or any of your ordinances regarding blight. All of that is still in effect.
Can someone be evicted out of there if they become a problem?
No, they own the building, so they would be foreclosed on. if they couldn't make their mortgage payment.
And then the town would be put on the, would have to fix it up. Because the town's gonna be the owner or the secondary owner, correct? If it's a
No.
land trust.
Yeah, so the land trust would likely operate outside of, it would be associated with the town, work closely with the town, but would be its own entity. If someone was foreclosed on, their bank would take possession of the building and the land trust would continue to own the land. So the land trust would have to work with the bank to find a new occupant.
Sounds kind of convoluted.
Well, hopefully it's not a situation that would happen, because
So the
this,
landlord
No, in a
would,
perfect world.
because you're vetting who's coming into this property, checking to make sure that they can afford the mortgage that they've applied for,
Right.
and that all of that checks out. So it is a risk, as is any home sale to anyone. But it really, the kind of landlord relationship doesn't exist in this model.
it's my experience that there's very limited financing available when you don't own the land underneath. Kind of like an RV park or a trailer park or, something like that. So it very, very narrow. Not too many banks want to loan money if you don't own the whole property.
Yeah, so with a RV park or a mobile home park, that's a for-profit scheme kind of thing.
Right.
So that's why banks are hesitant if it's a nonprofit and they're reputable. Banks usually tend to be a little bit more open to that. And as you'll see in our next example, there are programs in Connecticut that are focusing on home ownership for first-time low-income buyers. So that there is an openness to that within the state.
Right. But this is a hybrid of home ownership because you're kind of time sharing a little bit with the land trust.
I mean,
Right.
for 30 or 40 years, but yes.
Yeah, you still don't own the land though, but it's like a timeshare building or, a condo association. So the land trust has to have a division that is in the enforcement business, just like a condo association. I'm from Florida. This is like normal for us, condo associations and code enforcements and so forth. Otherwise, you're going full circle from acquiring a blighted property to it getting run down and becoming a blighted property again. You want to avoid that.
Right.
True. Any other questions on this before we move to our next one? All right. Oops. All right, so let's talk about CHFA. So the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority makes mortgages available to first-time home buyers who are typically low income. And they typically have lower interest rates than a standard mortgage to help these mortgages be more affordable. Working with CHFA, municipalities can share information, encourage potential home buyers to consider using their mortgage services. They can do this through advertising their classes. They have a lot of homeowner education that is free, and I mean, right now is all digital. There are also several counselors throughout the state that provide counseling to applicants. They're typically located, they have a map of it, and they're typically located along the highways. So there are a bunch down 91 and a bunch on the southern end of 95, but not much in your area. So there are some opportunities there to maybe bring counselors in. So that is CHFA. There are already CHFA mortgages in East Haddam. So over the last 5 years, they've made 26 loans to homeowners in East Haddam. 5 of them were already excuse me, 7 of them were already living in the community when they applied. So their median household income is just under 79,000. So again, under that 80% AMI. Their average age is 31 and their household size is just over 2. So these tend to be younger folks, couples or small families coming into the community for the first time and buying smaller homes that are about 3 bedrooms. So in regards to CHFA, in this question, you can select as many as you would like. So East Haddam should pursue hosting or advertising CHFA education classes, finding a partner to provide a CHFA housing counselor in the area. The town shouldn't pursue actions with CHFA, or they should try something else that I haven't mentioned yet. All right. So seems like generally in favor. That's great. Any questions or comments on this one before we move on? All right.
Well, these people are vetted by the loan officers, right?
Correct.
Prior to the loan, they're not just giving, yeah, so sure. So advertising and a partner, finding a partner to provide counseling is good.
Okay, so
And just one thing I'll add is that in the rural parts of East Haddam, people may be eligible for USDA mortgages as well, which are similar to the CHFA, and they're subsidized and count towards the affordable housing goals.
thanks, Sam. Great point. All right. So now for the big wrap up. In this exercise, you can click and drag each of the strategies we've talked about tonight in the order that you think that it would be most appropriate to least appropriate. So what do you think East Haddam should really look at first? So as a reminder, the town should study the suitability of underused properties for housing development. The town should acquire additional property for housing development. The town should support the development of a community land trust. The town should host or advertise CHFA homebuyer education classes. And lastly, the town should work with a partner to provide a CHFA counselor for the area. Okay. First responses in. Yeah, this one's takes a little bit longer to do.
I can't do it on the text, so
Yeah, sorry about that.
that's all right. That's pretty much what I'm looking at anyway. Except
Okay.
for the land trust. I think land trust should be last.
Okay. Noted. Thank you. Are people still working? Oh, there we go. There's one more. Can we get one more before we wrap it up? Well, while we're waiting for the last responses to come in, does anyone want to share why they chose the order that they did? Or if they have any questions or concerns about different strategies?
I just had a comment, sort of what you said in the beginning struck me in comparing with some of the supply and demand data that you showed. So I think you had a slide in the beginning that talked about showed a map of the town and showed sort of opportunities where density development could occur. And it was pretty much limited to the lake and to the village. So to get the greatest return on investment in terms of trying to open up housing opportunities, the studying is going to be kind of a challenging task, because if you're looking for a denser development that's going to provide more housing, more opportunities, your site's going to be fairly limited, because as you said, wastewater is going to be an issue because it's going to be more than likely on septic. Size of the property is going to be an issue, parking. So in terms of like actually really trying to get the most out of it to increase the most housing stock, that's going to be kind of a challenge in a town like East Haddam, where we have steep topography, wetlands, open space. The opportunities of potential sites that would really work probably are fairly limited.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are definite restrictions to development. So that map from earlier is your current zoning. So there may be opportunities to adjust your zoning to allow different types of residential development in different areas. So instead of just the lake and just the village, are there other places where those restrictions can be lifted or loosened? That would make it easier to develop housing in locations where it's more appropriate, where there's the right soils and the right topography. So that's definitely something to consider as well.
Well, it should be noted that the resort zone is an underlying, has a planned residential development regulation to it that does allow clustering. So that falls under that whole section of the near the villages, because it's near Moodus Village, that whole rezone. So that does have some potential, and it's actually been used a little bit, but could be used more. Moodus Village also has some potential on there, so other than just the East Haddam Village and the lakes.
Thanks, Jim.
As somebody that lives in the lake area, that's a challenge, because if you're near the lake, the prices go up. So that kind of knocks that out. And there are a lot of seasonal fishing, swimming cabins that people, came up for weekends. So I think there's a movement to take that from seasonal and convert them and approve for full year round. So I think in a rural town like ours, that's probably one of the ways that in our unique way we could, count that as more affordable housing. And also we've been doing a lot of accessory dwelling units, ADUs, finished room, apartments over garages and so forth. So I think because it's been developed starting 350 years ago, the die has been set, so to speak. And if you don't have a master plan in the beginning, I found from watching development in Florida, it's hard to back into something without a master plan from the beginning. So I think those are two ways, that this town can maybe fix the numbers. The other thing I'd like to say is, according to your report, one of the biggest employers is Shagbark. So I'm just thinking, I don't think it's a case necessarily build it and they'll come, because I think the economic opportunities are going to be outside of Haddam. And I'm saying that because my husband and I came here as a retired couple. So we weren't, constrained by the geographical, country roads and distances. This corridor is not convenient for young people to work or commute to the cities. And we searched up and down the East Coast, and that's why actually it's more affordable. We bought a house here that would be probably 5 times as much in Florida. So it's all relative.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. And something that the regional housing plan is looking at in a lot of depth is how housing and the economy are really linked. Something that one of our co-consultants has said is that housing is where jobs go at night. And if there aren't a lot of economic opportunities, there isn't a ton of demand. So that's why we focused on the folks that are commuting in. So while there isn't a lot in comparison to the workers
Commuting out.
commuting out during the day, it's still folks who are working at the school, who are working at town hall, who are doing day-to-day services for the community.
Yeah. And I think the second largest employer was a seasonal opera house. So, 3 months out of the year it's closed. So I don't think the economic opportunities are here so much. So, you build it and they're going to be telling you thanks. And now I have to drive to New Haven for my job.
Right. Yeah. And
I don't think that's the goal.
No. We are seeing a
Maybe-
lot of, sorry, go ahead.
Maybe because when we talk about open space and we look at properties for open space, one of the first things we do, we look at how many building units can go into that open space. Maybe we need to change our focus of open space to say, if we know how many units that land could support, maybe we should look at that for our additional suitable property for housing development, because we can get that at a less, a reduced price, because we're giving the owner a tax credit, or it's good for them tax wise. So instead of just having open spaces, vacant space that nobody's using, because we do have a lot of that where it's just trails on it, but there could be housing that could have gone there. I mean, that's probably limiting our affordable housing properties, because we're taking them, we as a town are buying up this property and just leaving it vacant, leaving it fallow, basically. And then why wouldn't we change our idea of open space to be more of a housing development that could bring, get us up to par with our affordable housing potential.
Yeah, that's definitely a thought. Sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say the flip side, the silver lining is during the COVID, there was a flight from urban areas to rural. And as you pointed out, our housing prices increased because of, I would call it city flight. So, the demand for rural type of low density areas was there. So they left high density areas.
Yeah, and in addition, we're seeing a lot more people being able to work from home, to do telework, at least part of the week, if not all the time. And people want to live somewhere beautiful, and East Haddam is beautiful. So that may be a trend that continues into the future.
My husband's daughter and her husband used to live in the city, thought they'd never leave, but with COVID, they were allowed to telecommute. And a year later, they ended up buying a house 2 counties up, and they love it. They just teleconference and now live on a house on 22 acres.
Yeah, exactly. So that it's a brave new world. There's a lot that can really work in East Haddam's favor.
Yeah, and that's
Go
ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, another thing that I struggle with when we talk about affordable housing is, as you mentioned, there's a 30% of their income should go to the cost of housing. But if we don't have the job base for these folks, they have to commute somewhere, right? And us being where we are, we're not on a bus line, we're not on a train line, that kind of thing. So they have to have a car and they have to pay for gas that's going up. So, how does those kind of costs get factored in when you're trying to look to, I totally understand the affordable housing around a train station or a bus station, because
Right.
people can literally walk to the train station, get on, and they don't have that additional cost. But, in a place like us here in East Haddam, it's 15 minutes to a highway, let alone, a job. So, I guess I think that should be factored in, that we can't just assume that, housing costs are housing costs, because there has to be some kind of living cost as well. And it does
Yeah.
cost more to live here because it costs more to get to the job, because not all jobs are telecommute. And if you're talking about lower income folks, those jobs are more likely jobs that you don't telecommute, right? I mean, more of our telecommuting jobs are on a higher professional level, that kind of thing. People who are getting to a job are lower income jobs. You have to be there, right? So how do we address the cost of living here, not just housing costs? Because I think
Yeah.
that needs to be factored in too.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is never easy. And that's why we tried to do that gap analysis, where you see what is currently in your current town population, where there's need for more affordable housing. Because these folks already live here. If they're commuting, they're already commuting, and they're hustling and making it work. But if there were more opportunities, they would be able to live more comfortably, and stay in the community. And we also, again, we're not just talking about people coming in from somewhere else, but people who are already in the community. If someone goes through a divorce or loses a spouse, they suddenly go from a 2-income family to a 1-income family. And does that mean they need to leave? Do they have to take their kids to a new school district because that happened? Or is there somewhere that they can move to within town? So that is something we also should focus on as well, is making sure that there are options. Oh, sorry.
That's one of the realities of life, that happens to people. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people sometimes, and you have to real life to go along with it.
So I just want to dovetail off of what Liz has said, and just kind of in response to all of these questions, which are really great discussion points. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to take a regional approach to this housing plan in general, because we are a 17-town region. Each one of them is very different, and we recognize that each town has something to offer. And I'm going to make the same plug again. I highly recommend going back and listening to the presentations from the regional level, particularly our first presentation in October, where our consultant Don Poland from Goman and York did a really comprehensive analysis of the entire region's housing market and job trends and demographic trends, to kind of see how things shake out across the region. We have a couple of good areas for job centers. We have a couple of good areas that might be more suited to higher density, but even our towns that are more rural can still contribute something to this overall picture. In addition, we do have these 830J plans that we have to explain how the town is going to increase their supply of affordable housing. So there is a way for every town to do this. There's no specific number. There's no specific type per se. So we're just looking at ways that the overall number of affordable housing units that are consistent with East Haddam can fit for you. So it's important to keep in mind the larger context as well, that no town is an island, and everyone is kind of interweaving. And so, as I said at the beginning, we're taking all of the feedback that we hear from all of the towns, and we're fitting that back in to the overall regional picture as well.
Yeah.
I think one thing we have to look at, and I asked for it to be brought up, was that number, I think it was 42% of the people that are in trouble are seniors.
Mhm.
And we know for a fact, we've talked about it for decades, how the senior housing has always got a waiting list. And that's, I think, where we need help, is finding another investor or getting them to, move. They have additional land to move, because if they move out of the house that's a burden for them, it may not be as much of a burden for those younger ones that are, as in that same situation. So I it's in pieces, but I think that may be the first step for us, is to look at our senior housing stock and what's available. I know down the road they put the 32 or 33 units in on Grove Street, and they were immediately occupied.
Mhm.
And they're tiny units, they're small. That's what people are looking for. They don't need 4 bedrooms.
How many units are they putting in Haddam at that recently approved site that's near the market and where the cooking company was?
So one of them was 42 units, and
Yeah.
another one that was approved previous in the year was 82. They have the advantage of having the best sand and gravel by drift for septic, and they are on the city water. So they were able to get away with that density based on the septic capabilities. We have a couple of pockets of that here. I hate to say it, though, the best pocket we have is off of Falls Road and around the lakes, but those are already occupied with tiny cottages and family
Seasonal.
homes. If you had to, if talk about master plan, if you started off back in the 1600s, said that's sand and gravel, let's save that for water and heavy development.
Jim, just to add to what you just said, I talked to Brad this morning, and there's 65 people waiting for housing at Oak Grove.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Mhm.
It is a lot.
Yeah, so are there other strategies that this conversation has sparked that you think the town should be looking into? Open question.
I think the question came up just yesterday about the excess land that Oak Grove has behind it, and why, if there's that kind of a list, why hasn't that been brought forward and additional units put up there? Because we can do that. So that's a start right there.
Yeah.
To Irene's point, I'd be curious, how many that are waiting for that to become available? How many are actually finding jobs in our town, or are they spending over their 30% allotment for housing needs in commuting to Meriden or something,
Yeah. So at least the calculations that we're using do not include transportation. So that's an additional cost.
Right.
So Liz, we have changed due to our plan of conservation development. We did change the zoning in Moodus, and we now have a stretch of Falls Road there that has the multi-use 2-story, 3-story building use now. So we've done some of the things that we said that we were going to do to help make some of this happen. So we are kind of working at that. And to Jim's point, we might have options, but we need to find these developers that are willing to join us and helping with this, right? So you have to find the developer that's willing to come in and do this. So if you guys know people who do this kind of development work, and I know for a fact that there are more developers these days getting involved in affordable housing kind of development work, because it's turning into, because it's on everybody's list of to-dos, people are finding that it's not a bad way to get into development work. So if you know people out there, we'd love to give them a tour.
All right. Yeah, we can definitely name drop a little bit in your plan.
And of course, being the Florida person, I'd be curious to know, in Florida, there was, people wanted to find a secondary home to live in just a few months out of the year. So, even though they were not housing, what was your term? Housing burdened, living in their $1 million mansion up in, wherever, their second home would be, something modest, 2-bedroom. So I'd be curious if we built apartments overlooking the Moodus Reservoir, how many would be city people who wanted a weekend getaway,
Yeah.
So how do you help the folks who really need it versus the, other people who, would jump ahead, pay cash and get that cute little 2-bedroom condo overlooking the Connecticut River or Bashan Lake or Moodus Reservoir? I just think that should be included in the study. Because
Yeah, absolutely.
it's not helping the people it's intended to help.
Yeah, so that is one of the drawbacks of the open market, that just because you're building it doesn't mean it'll be occupied by somebody who is in that income level or that really needs it. So that's where deed restriction comes in. So that can be one of the benefits of a strategy like a community land trust, or the Chaffa mortgages, in that they're targeting folks that are in these income levels. They're reserving property for them, so that it can't be released to the open market. And then these folks that are low income are now in competition with everyone else.
In Florida, we had the 55 and over rule, to at least try to eliminate the competition for, the intended target market.
Great.
I never understood how that was legal, but technically,
Yeah.
it's kind of discriminatory. I'm over 55, so I can say that.
No, I really appreciate all this feedback and all this discussion. This has been incredibly helpful for me. Are there any other folks who want to speak up or speak on this topic or something else?
No.
All right. Well, then I'll talk about our next steps. So we're going to take a lot of this input and we're going to continue to work on more specific strategies for your community. And we'll be preparing a draft plan that should be ready the end of March, beginning of April. And then it will be released for public review. And you'll get to give some feedback on that. Towards the end of the spring, we'll finalize the plan and it can be adopted and submitted to the state for June 1st. So if there are any other questions or comments or things you want to bring to our attention, I'm going to throw Jim under the bus here, provide his email so he can collate it all and forward it to us. And as I said, we're happy to answer any questions or go into a little bit more detail on all of this data I flung at you, and make this process as collaborative as possible. All right, so I think that's all I have because we've gone into our discussion a little bit already. So with that, I'll turn it back over to RiverCOG if they would like to close it out.
I just put in the chat the project website again. So please check back to the project website. We're going to be posting the recording of this meeting so you can share this presentation with others in town who weren't able to attend tonight. Please feel free to reach out to us or reach out to Jim Ventris, who is your liaison for the town. And I just want to thank you all for being able to attend tonight and coming. And we hope that you stay involved in this process over the next couple of months.
Thank you very much. It was a good,
Thank you.
good program tonight.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you
Thank you.
all.
All right, have a great
Thank
night.
you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jim.
Move to adjourn.
I second that.
All in
Good night,
favor?
everybody.
Happy birthday,
Night.
Susan.
Yeah.
There we go.